All right, so thanks again for joining us tonight. My name is Colleen McCoy, and along with my colleague Denise Woltering Vargas at Tulane University, I coordinate the Américas Award for Children's and Young Adult Literature. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's program, Luciano Marzulli. Luciano is the K-16 Outreach Coordinator for the Asia Center and the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Utah. And he's also a current member of the Américas Award Review Committee. So Luciano, thank you again for leading our program tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Colleen. Good evening or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. And please continue, if you're just joining us right now, to drop a message in the chat where you're joining us from. Today's program focuses on the 2020 Américas Award winning title, Between Us and Abuela, a family story from the border, written by Mitali Perkins and illustrated by Sarah Palacios. The title focuses on a family connecting through the US-Mexico border fence in San Diego. So author Mitali Perkins is joining us tonight to read her title, as well as engage in some Q&A with everyone who's joining us tonight. So I have some words to say about CLASP and the award. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll turn the time over to Mitali. So to get started, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. This is something that I started doing with my programs last year in 2019 during the UN Year of Indigenous Languages. I'm joining you all from Salt Lake City, Utah, and want to acknowledge the first peoples of this area, the Ute, Shoshone, Goshute, Paiute, and Dene. And I'd also like to acknowledge the First Nations of the San Diego, Tijuana area where our title takes place. They are the Kumeyaay, Payo Kabwichum, Ku'iyachim, and Cahuila peoples. And just 2 weeks ago, it's notable to recognize that two Kumeyaay land defenders were arrested protesting an expansion of the US-Mexico border wall on sacred land there. So with that, I invite you all to acknowledge and recognize the first peoples of the places where you all are joining from tonight. I have a few words about CLASP. So the Consortium for Latin American Studies Programs, or CLASP, promotes all facets of Latin American studies nationwide. CLASP fosters global competency, language proficiency, and cultural awareness of Latin America and the Caribbean, drawing upon interdisciplinary and area expertise. CLASP founded the Américas Award in 1993 to encourage and commend authors, illustrators, and publishers who produce quality children's and young adult books that portray Latin America, the Caribbean, or Latinx people in the United States. CLASP offers up 2 annual book awards together with a commended list of titles, and at some point tonight we'll drop a link for the resources on the CLASP page that we have that are associated with previous Américas Awards titles. The awards are administered by the Consortium for Latin American Studies Programs and coordinated by both Tulane University's Stone Center for Latin American Studies and Vanderbilt University's Center for Latin American Studies. Generous support is also provided by Florida International University, Stanford University, The Ohio State University, UNC Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies, University of Florida, University of New Mexico, University of Texas at Austin, University of Utah, the institution that I'm joining you from, and the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for tonight's event, the Hispanic Division at the Library of Congress, as well as the publisher, Farrar Straus Giroux, for submitting the book this year to be considered for the award. Now I'm going to introduce our guest of honor, Mitali Perkins. Mitali has written novels for young readers, including You Bring the Distant Near, a National Book Award nominee, a Walter Honor Book, a South Asia Book Award winner, a Publisher's Weekly Best Book of the Year, and the Shelf Awareness 2017 Best Book of the Year. Another title, Rickshaw Girl, NYPL Top 100 Book, and Bamboo People, an ALA, American Library Association, Top 10 Young Adult Novel. Mitali was born in India and currently resides in Northern California. So Mitali, it's an honor to have you here tonight, and please, if there's anything you'd like to share before getting into your presentation, or if you'd like to just dive right in, the time is yours. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lou. I am so happy to be here and so delighted about this award. It's amazing, all of these institutions of higher education putting their great minds together. It's a great honor. I see some familiar faces in the crowd, and so welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. I believe stories for children have the power to change the world. So that is why we're here. And I wanted to start with I guess, Lou, should I go ahead and start with my presentation, and then we'll go to questions after that? Okay, great. Well, I thought I'd share with you what I talk about when I visit K-2 schools with this book, and then show you some of the resources that I use, because it is a complicated matter talking about the border between Mexico and the United States. So I want to just give a shout out and a great thanks to Sarah Palacios, who is a co-collaborator on the book. Her illustrations were fantastic. We as authors don't have any say in who gets to illustrate our books. So I was so delighted when Farrar, Straus and Giroux was able to secure the talents of Sarah. So what I like to talk about when I introduce the book to kids is I like to talk about grandparents, festivals, and neighbors. I figure every kid in the room will understand those three things, including the kids in this room right now. So the first thing I do is I introduce them to my grandparents. I lived far away from my grandparents. That's my maternal grandmother. They're holding my hand, and my paternal grandmother. And like many immigrants, we left our grandparents far behind and didn't see my grandparents for years and years and years and years. I always had a longing in my heart to see them. And I remember the first time we went to visit them, it was so exciting. My heart was just going pitter patter. I just was so excited to see my grandmothers especially, and the love that I felt from them. So it's one of the costs of immigration is growing up far away from your extended family. So maybe you too didn't grow up near your grandparents. I know a lot of us through the pandemic, some of us may be grandparents and are missing our grandkids, or you just have that special bond. In fact, someone said the real reason to have kids is so you can have grandkids. And then I think I heard someone else say that grandparents and grandkids have so much in common because they share a common enemy, which I think is probably true. I'm not a grandparent yet, but hopefully soon. So grandparents are something I think we all share, whether we saw them or not. They have a revered place in our memory, especially grandmothers. And then there's festivals, right? So every culture has its festivals, and I discovered a festival, a marvelous festival when we lived in Mexico called Las Posadas, and it's the days right before Christmas where a village will celebrate and remember the journey of Jose and Maria as they went from inn to inn to inn, from posada to posada to posada, to try to find some room to have their baby. And unlike that long ago time in Bethlehem, there was room, there always is room at the posada in these festivals, and people come in to a house, a designated house, and they celebrate and eat and drink and feast. So usually I ask kids, you know, what do you do at festivals? What's a festival? And what do you eat? What do you drink? And I have the kids share their festivals that are special to them. And then I introduce this festival. So then we talk about neighbors, right? The third thing. And I introduced the concept of countries as neighbors. Some of these kids who are K-2 don't even know what a country is, but I explain that if you drive all the way down from California, where I live, and you cross a border, that you get to another country called Mexico. And then I tell them that 50 years ago, 2021 actually, is the 50th anniversary of a special place called Friendship Park. And First Lady Pat Nixon set up Friendship Park right at the border between San Diego and Tijuana. And she said, this is going to be a place where families meet and greet and celebrate together. And there was a little barbed wire fence, as you see there. And she had her Secret Service people cut the barbed wire fence. She said, there's no need for this fence. There's no need for a fence. This is Friendship Park, right? Well, I was a little girl back then. So things have seriously changed down there on the border, as you all know. I talk about how I try to imagine, for kids to imagine when you're living next door to someone in an apartment, and when you get along really well with those people, you can run in and out of their door and borrow sugar or have a cup of lemonade. But when people don't get along as well, then sometimes it's hard to go across the hall or go down the street to have that easy interchange, right? So I talk about countries having good neighbor relations, and then sometimes they don't get along as well. And in the last decades, the relationship between Mexico and the United States has become tougher and tougher and tougher. And so as a result, of course, there are fences now. That's Friendship Park, and now there are 2 fences between the Tijuana side and the US side, and you can only visit for very short lengths of time. They open the fence gate and let a few people in at a time, and one of the times is a special celebration called La Posadas, La Posada Sin Fronteras, which means the Inn Without Borders. So for the last 25, 26 years, people have celebrated Las Posadas on both sides of the border in Friendship Park, where people meet and they sing and they share this wonderful festival. I was very intrigued by this festival because it's a festival celebrating hospitality for the stranger. And here we have this progression of more and more and higher fences, and neighborly relations really becoming quite a problem down in the southern border. So I don't know if any of you have ever been to San Diego, but it's something to see that fence stretching all the way out on the ocean. And of course it's militarized, there's border patrol officers. So, but they have managed to have this La Posada Sin Fronteras celebration there for many, many years. It's a very special celebration. It's actually kind of magical. So last year I went, and the border was completely closed. So we couldn't even get from the US side up to the fence to share. Because there's a part in Las Posadas where you sing a chorus back and forth. And the Tijuana side sings, I think it's 7 times. They say, is there any room at the inn? And on the US side, we had to answer no, 7 times in a row. And then finally, the 7th time, you get to say, yes, stranger, yes, pilgrim, yes, peregrino, come on in, come in. And so it's a marvelous feeling to be able to say yes. But there we are in a juxtaposition between the celebration of hospitality for the stranger and this high fence, right? So I was very intrigued by that contradiction. And I really think children can understand that as you introduce that. So let's see what's going on here. Why am I? Okay, so I thought I'd start just by reading the book to you, and you can get a sense of some of the other contradictions of the story that you want to pay attention to as grown-ups. Is the juxtaposition of power with art. I want you to pay attention to that. And also, as I said before, the juxtaposition of the Christmas story with the lack of hospitality for the stranger. So let's read the story. Okay. Between Us and Abuela, a family story from the border. Abuela stars in all of Mama's stories, but my only memory is a voice calling me Angelita. We haven't seen my grandmother in 5 years, but today is La Posada Sin Fronteras, and we are taking a bus to the border to meet her. We take the bus to Borderfield State Park in San Diego. Mama's needles are clicking away. We're knitting a scarf for Abuela to wear on the long journey back to her village. I did most of it myself, but Mama is finishing it. Juan has a present for Abuela too. Most of the big piece of cardboard is blank, but in the middle are Mary and Joseph, 2 short sticks with arms. Las Posadas are small squares labeled inns, no room. When the bus drops us off, we walk and walk along the beach. Juan carries his picture high so it doesn't get sandy or wet. We see the top of a white lighthouse. Mama's hand tightens on mine. That's in Mexico, she says. We walk closer. 2 high, strong fences stretch along the border, reaching deep into the sea. Border patrol officers are waiting. 25 people at a time, the shorter one tells us. Each group gets 30 minutes. We stand in line. Visitors press against the second fence, singing and laughing with friends and family in Mexico, but the fence only has tight, small openings. We might be able to squeeze our gift through to Abuela, but what about Juan's picture? It will never fit. Mama drapes the scarf around my neck. Maybe when he sees her, he'll forget it, she whispers. We wait while another group goes in. A gusty wind makes the palm trees dance. They lean to the Mexico side, far away from us. Finally, it's our turn. The gate swings open. Is Abuela there? Sylvia, Sylvia! I know that voice. That's Mama's name. A pinky wiggles through the fence. Juan, Maria, estoy aquí. Abuela, abuela, guapito. She calls Juan her little handsome. Maria Angelita, I am still her angel. Mama's words trip over Abuela's. Cousins, chickens, corn, everything in the village has grown. Abuela drops kisses on our fingers. She is short, brown, plump, and jolly. Hugging her would feel like hugging a chunk of cookie dough. Juan's eye is pressed against a hole. One edge of the picture is in the dirt. Maybe Mama was right. He has forgotten it, at least for now. The minutes race by. A priest reads the Christmas story. He leads a carol about Las Posadas. I close my eyes to hear Abuela and Mama sing. For a moment, the fences are invisible. The officer opens the gate. Time's up. Suddenly, I remember the scarf, Abuela's gift. I try to push the end of it through the mesh. Abuela's pinky touches the soft wool. Para mí, gracias, Maria. The officer strides over and grabs the scarf. His fingers squeeze and clutch the wool. It's taken so long to knit. Is he going to keep it? But he hands it back to Mama. Sorry, he says. We can't let anything through the fence. She drapes it back around my neck. We'll send it by mail, Maria. But now, Abuela can't wear it on the long journey home. The gate bangs shut. We're outside. Juan holds up his picture. What about my gift? Sorry, Papi, Mama says. No way to get it across. Juan's tears become a howl. Abuela calls out her worry. ¿Qué pasó? Mama can't explain. Juan is too loud. She steers him to a bench. There has to be a way to get that picture to Abuela. I glare at the fences. Two seagulls take off from the sand and soar over the border. Suddenly I have an idea. Mama, give me your knitting bag. She looks up. Why, Maria? You'll see. Juan, I'll get your picture to Abuela. He stops crying and hands it to me. Abuela, espérate, I call to my grandmother. Will she hear? Will she wait? Claro, Maria, she shouts. Everything I need is in Mama's knitting bag. I start by trimming the cardboard into a diamond. My brother doesn't stop me. There's still plenty of space around Stick Mary and Stick Joseph. Next, I lay 2 knitting needles, one longer, one shorter, across the corners and fasten them in place with wool. Mama helps me attach one end of a ball of thin, strong yarn to the cross of needles. I poke a needle through the ball so 2 ends stick out. Better ask permission, Mama says. When I hold up my invention, the shorter officer shakes his head, but the taller one takes it and looks at it closely. He smiles when he sees Juan's drawing. It won't be passing through the fence, right, kid? No, I promise. Beach would be a better place, he says. Mama, Juan and I head to the shore. Juan, throw the picture up when I shout. Mama, be ready with the scissors. Juan lifts the picture. I take the string, turn my back, and run. Throw, Juan! At first, the yarn pulls taut behind me, but then the wind dies. The picture nose dives into the sand. Juan runs to get it. I spin the string back around the needle. We try again. Watchers on both sides of the border are calling out advice. The patrol officer's voice booms down. Don't give up, kid! For the 3rd time, Juan runs to get the picture while I twist up the wool. We get back in our places. Throw, Juan! I race across the beach. The yarn pulls taut like it did before. I glance over my shoulder. This time, the ball unwinds steadily, taking Abuela's gift up and up. Juan's face is tipped back. Go, 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 he screams. Others join in and it becomes a chant. Everyone cheers when the picture rises as high as the fence. Mama, the scissors! With one snip, she cuts the yarn. The wind holds, and Juan's gift soars over both fences straight into Mexico. Shouts come from our side. Where is it? Keep an eye on it. Mexico answers. It's landed. It's in the sand. Your grandmother has it. The crowd cheers. Juan does a victory dance. We can't see through the fences, but I picture Abuela scurrying across the beach. She will pick up Juan's gift. She might even kiss Stick Mary and Stick Joseph. Then she will carry them as carefully as my brother did, all the way home.
Thank you for the reading and for the context that you gave before the reading. I love this title, and I think one of the things that I find so valuable is the setting. Can you share what inspired you to write a children's picture book that features the US-Mexico border so prominently and in a way that is so central to the narrative?
Yes, I've always been a person who's been fascinated with borders. Part of the reason is I myself am hyphenated, and I like to stay very close to that hyphen when it comes to my own identity. I like to champion both sides, but I also find a lot of value in that border between two cultures. There's something about that border that reveals more about either side than any place that's smack in the middle of both sides. So I've always been fascinated by borders and border crossings. My father was a port director. We traveled around the world, went to lots of countries, and he always loved border crossing. He got really excited about them. So I think that I'm a Californian, and so that southern border is always been a place of fascination for me because, as I said, it's progressively gotten more and more and more difficult to cross and to meet your family.
Thank you. And just as a reminder to everyone that's joining us, if you have a question, I saw some comments coming through the chat, but please, if you have questions, please drop those into the chat and I'll get to those. You mentioned being in Friendship Park earlier in this evening. Can you share some reflections about your experience, being in Friendship Park or any other borders throughout the world that, you mentioned that that story about your dad. Yeah, if you could expand a little bit about that and kind of what that's like being in that place, particularly along the San Diego-Tijuana border.
Yeah, I think the ironic name of it caught my attention first, that it's called Friendship Park, and that it was set up as a place to meet and greet and to share friendship across borders. And then now it has been such a place of restriction. Last year, we couldn't even get near the border. We had to go to a park that was about 2 miles away and trust that our responsive readings were being shared. This year, the US side is completely closed because of the pandemic, but the Tijuana side is open, as always. So, and they're actually installing a brand new fence that's even higher with more restrictive slats and all up and down the border. So that's going to be in place. They're trying desperately to save the garden. There's a binational garden that's planted and tended by both sides. They have had art exhibits and all kinds of cross-border events, including La Posadas y Fronteras in that place. So I think I was drawn to the fact that it's such a unique, special place set up for friendship, and yet really demonstrates how our country's changed when it comes to xenophobia and that welcome for the stranger that used to, when I came in the 70s, to me, Lady Liberty was wearing a sari and she was saying, come on in, so that's changed.
Yeah, and I think when I see this title, I think there's so much that young people can connect with in the story regarding family and cultural celebrations and holidays. And I think I'm curious what are your hopes for educators that are engaging with this title with young people, with people in K through 5, K through 6, where the grades where they're working on reading and engaging in children's picture books. What are you hoping that educators are talking with young people about when they read your title?
Right, this was my first picture book. I skipped picture books when I was a kid. I started reading really early, but I did read picture books with my own children, and I found that so marvelous because what I missed, I was a feral reader. I just entered the library and just read what I wanted with no adult intervention at all or guidance. So that was good, but I didn't really have a chance to discuss some of these difficult issues with a trusted adult. So I found that very wonderful with the picture book, because you're gathering children together and there is that chance for adult mediation of some of these difficult issues. I know that I remember when I read, and I was 7, 8, 9, I remember being willing to grapple with issues like poverty and hunger and injustice. I think we sell children short when we think that, they just, when I say I read a picture book, people who are outside the children's book world will say, oh, like, did you feature bunny rabbits or did you feature elephants? Something like that. And, I really do believe children whose hearts are wide open, they read with their hearts and their minds open. So this is a time to shape their heart when it comes to justice issues or compassion, or even the issues of, like I talked about, neighborliness. One of the things that I tried to show in the book is I'm not sure that a Border Patrol officer would be as amenable as the one in my story, but it's a compilation of 25 years of that celebration. And there have been times when it's been more lax. But I wanted to show how children and art and power are something that can interact when it comes to justice. There's that moment when the Border Patrol officer considers Juan's picture, and that's when he changes, when he has his metanoia moment, is when he's confronted with the art of a child. So there's that powerful and that powerlessness that I tried to bring together in that moment, still really believing that children can, the art of the weak can really speak to the powerful and change things. So that's all in it. Now you're going to talk about that with a K through 12, but as I said, children, or K through 5, as I said, children read with heads and hearts. So I believe their hearts are so much more open than ours, and those messages do come through. When it comes to adult mediation, I'm going to share my screen again and show you some of the things that I have on my website. Yeah, so this is my own website, and I have some questions here that I use to talk about with kids. What was sad about this book, what was happy about the book. I like to hear children's answers. They teach me. They have a lot to say when it comes to this. Why can't Maria visit her grandmother anytime she wants? Now, in my imagination, they're undocumented, but I didn't put that in the book, but that can maybe come out. Maybe they need certain papers. Maybe they don't have the money. We didn't have the money to fly and see our grandparents. So that sort of helps children to see that there's some other constraints, that you can't just go and see your grandparents anytime you want. Why can't the family touch or give presents to each other through the fence? That's something you want children to think about. Did the patrol officer break the rules? Did Maria break the rules? Did he change his mind? I love asking children this story. Inevitably, they will say, he changed his mind because of Juan's picture. I've read the story to hundreds of children, and they always come up with that answer. Adults miss it. Children don't miss it. They're like, it's Juan's picture. Is a fence between countries fair? Why or why not? Now, I have some other resources on my website. If you click on the Between Us and Abuela, there's things like what is a country? And then there's some other links, like there's one that's a lesson plan that was generated by an educator. That's really a wonderful resource. There's a link to that in there. That she created some frameworks and some things that will be helpful to you guys. So just pop on over to my website and you can have a look at all of those.
Thank you so much for yeah, we'll make sure that we share those in the chat and get those out to our attendees tonight. And we did have a couple of questions that came in from attendees. You mentioned having read this title to children, and can you share some of the reactions that you've had from children in particular when they engage with this story for the first time, and some of the emotions that they share with you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the audience, I got a little choked up tonight. I get choked up when I read the story just because, I've read it to hundreds of Guatemalan children, El Salvadorian children, like children of that context who are separated, who are undocumented here in California. And then I've read it in private schools where there are wealthy people who see their grandparents all the time. But they find connections and they find bridges. Like I would think I read it at a Jewish private school once, and the little boy raised his hand. He said, and I thought, what's he going to ask? And he said, "My name is Joseph." Like he wanted me to know that he was named Joseph too. You know, and that's the mystery of a story, right? You're gonna find your own connections. The reader owns the story as much as the writer and the illustrator, and that is the power of a story. So children find their own beautiful connections. Often when it's that kind of more wealthy, privileged group of kids, they'll ask questions like, well, why didn't you fly there? Or why didn't you just drive across the border? And then inevitably I'll get a little guy, you know, and he'll say, I would just get in the truck and I would ram down that fence and I would just go over there and grab my grandmother. You know, so I find it so interesting that they get that injustice. Like it shouldn't, a grandchild should not be separated from a grandmother, should not be unable to hug their grandparents. So that's across the board. But for some children, this is a mirror. And that's when it's really special, is when they can tell me about their own stories, and they can feel safe and say, you know, I haven't seen mi abuelita and I miss her, or those kinds of things. So we do connect over festivals, grandmothers, and also neighbors, and we talk about that. But by the end, a successful talk is when they're calling me Abuelita Mitali, and I'm leaving like with 200 grandchildren. It's always the most fun.
That's got to be a great feeling. I was gonna ask as well. You know, I think some of the imagery is so powerful, and you had mentioned working with Sarah Palacios, the illustrator for the title, and I think, you know, the imagery is so powerful in the sense of, you know, you shared actual photos of the border at Friendship Park, and, you know, Sarah did such a great job of capturing that region, but also capturing the emotion that you mentioned right now. You know, the fact that they're like touching through these little openings in the fence, and, you know, what that's like, and having people either connect to that or have to consider that for the first time. So can you share a little bit about what it was like working with Sarah, and, you know, how you're able to share maybe some of your priorities for the illustrations for this book?
Well, I'm so delighted because, you know, Sarah spends half her time in Mexico and half her time in the United States. So it was great to have that collaboration. I've lived there, you know, I speak some Spanish, but I'm from India. So it was wonderful for her to add her own layers of authenticity. One of the things she added that was so delightful was, if you read the story, is to track the seagulls through the story. So I had mentioned the seagulls 1 or 2 times in the story, not once, I think, that the seagulls, there's one part where she sees the seagulls soar over the fence, and it gives her that idea. But almost in every spread, Sarah included seagulls. And for me, as I read them, they came to sort of symbolize, because they just travel back and forth with no restraint. They came to symbolize that, you know, the idea that love is not stopped by fences. And often birds, I think, bring that picture in of that, the freedom of love is a symbol. And so she just used that so beautifully, like all throughout. If you have the book, just notice the presence of white seagulls, and Sarah added that. She also made Abuelita, so cute. I wanted to hug her myself. She was adorable. And I love that the illustrations are so accessible to small children. Now, one of the things she did, which I did not, she chose the races and the sizes and the personifications of the Border Patrol officers. So she chose the one that was a little more rigid to be the brown one, the Moreno, and the other one was the one that had the change of heart, the bigger white guy. And I thought that was interesting. That was not my decision, that was Sara's decision. And their names are on, she put their names on, I didn't name them, but she put names on them, and she gave them a little bit more nuance. So those were all things she added so beautifully. And we went back and forth a couple of times. There were a couple of things, like the situation changes so fast at the border. So I had to make it an amalgamation of all the years, because there are times when it was easier to get in and times when it was harder. So we worked back and forth as things were changing. It was very fluid.
That's great. That's good to hear that kind of context and the liberties that ended up kind of giving some added nuance to the title, with the seagulls and then the reflection of the agents. I mean, that's the reality oftentimes. If you're encountering agents, they span, you know, races and ethnicities here in the U.S. I'm going to turn to the chat now to see a couple questions that came in from our audience. Are you aware of any other Posadas sin Fronteras and other sections of the US-Mexico border?
I don't think there are any across the border. I know that it's throughout New Mexico, Texas. Their celebration happens all in the United States, but this is, I think, the only cross-border celebration that is very proactive. It's a peacemaking gesture, of course, because it confronts the realities that the juxtaposition of those strange things meeting at a place called Friendship Park. So it's a very political peacemaking effort that's a cross-border collaboration. Really, I think it's organized by people who are very committed to peacemaking. So, so I interviewed them, I met with them, I tried to put some of their vision into the story as well. And last year I got to go and read the book to kids at the border. My publisher donated a bunch of books and we got to give them away to every child that showed up for the celebration, which was quite generous. And that was a real delight.
Tremendous, yeah. We have a question that came in about the book writing process. Can you tell us how long the process was in terms of your writing, but then also working with Sarah, from start to finish? Can you tell us a little bit give us some insight on how that looks for you?
Well, people are always astounded by how slow it is for a book to come out because it just takes forever. But in a way, it's a grace because, we're in the age of instant and communication, and because it goes back and forth and there is time to sit, you get a chance to really look at it and see if it says what it wants you to say, if you want it to say. So it's a pretty slow process. This is, as I said, my first picture book. I'm a novelist, and I was pretty verbose at the first draft. So, even now when I read it, because my second one my second and third ones have been written and are coming out. The second one is called Home is in Between, and it's about a child exploring that in-between space between cultures. And the third one is called, what is it called? Actually, it's something else with the word between in it. The 3 Between books, and they're all coming out from Macmillan. And it's about justice. Oh, what's between my hands? And the idea of exploring the namaste. When you namaste, it's like you're welcoming the planet. You're trying to serve the planet. So the idea of what's between my hands. So it's what's between my hands, in between his home and Between Us and Abuela. By the time I wrote What's Between My Hands, I had gotten the genre a little bit. I had understood the genre a little better. That the collaboration with an illustrator, leaving room for the art, not having to cover everything in words, the setting. In a novel, you have to do it all. So I was able to pull back. I'm getting better. I'm improving my craft. There's always hope, even for an oldster. And this is my 13th and 14th book, so you can always learn. It's fun to see yourself grow.
That's great. And we have another question. I wanted to come back to some of the other titles. That was one question I was going to ask here, but we'll come back to that. We have another question that came in on the chat, and I'll read it. It says, my own children in 1st and 2nd grade are learning about community, in quotes, online now. One question asked in the 1st grade class was, who protects the community? And another question asked in 2nd grade was, how do we keep order in the community? I.e. law enforcement, laws, etc., are more than just black and white, right or wrong. How can educators address that these entities can be unjust even at a young age? Do you have some suggestions for how to talk about justice to young people, to children?
Well, I think just the way you frame that question is really good. Just that the entities can be unjust. People, I think children and then people who don't grow up tend to see things as just good guys and bad guys. And just that the nuance that it really depends. There's a theory that, at least in the global context, that the poor are best served by police with integrity, and that we're seeing that played out in our country as well. That when the police lose integrity, it's a disaster for the most marginalized of people. They can't count on the police not being corrupt or having biases. Then it's very, very difficult to even progress from poverty. So I think that children understanding that, just that bad guys and good guys are not just about cops and robbers, but that we need to have good guys and women. We need to have good people, people of integrity, people of character matters if they're in these positions of power. I think children can understand that. You can understand that, what, and they're very open to that, to thinking about what would happen if somebody who didn't have goodness became the teacher of a classroom and was in that position of power. How would that play out? And they could imagine that, what it would be to have a bad guy or as their teacher. So then they can see that it really does matter, that integrity and character of the people who are in authority really do matter.
And I'll add to that. And I think, children are highly perceptive, and so I think that the fact that they're, as adults, sometimes we don't think that they're picking up on some of these nuances and some of these gray areas, but I think they very much are. And I think as educators, when we don't address it, we're risking losing the trust of children because, they're noticing something that we're not willing to talk about. So I think talking about it is a really important thing to do. And I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to do it. I think the important thing is just to address it and figure it out with the children instead of expecting to have the right answers.
Yeah, I think part of it is creating the environment to ask the questions and not feeling like you have to have all the answers, but really encouraging them to ask the important questions is, I'd say, most of would be successful for a classroom educator at that stage, would be to create that kind of environment where any question could be asked and really celebrating those questions that bring out the nuances.
I agree. Yeah. Establishing trust, I think, is the key when working with young people and creating an environment where they feel comfortable having those conversations that might be tougher for us than it is for them, right? They're just curious and trying to figure out this world that we're in.
Put on a lot of deodorant and just have the conversation. That's my advice.
That's good advice. Let's see here. Again, I'll just encourage, we've got about 15 minutes left. If we've got some more folks that have questions, don't be shy. Please drop them in the chat. You mentioned, I'll come back to some of your forthcoming titles. You just mentioned by name and give us a little bit of a teaser about some of those forthcoming titles, but if you want to talk a little bit more about those, that would be wonderful for our audience tonight.
Right, I would love to. Well, Home is in Between is coming out in February 2021. I don't have anything to show you, but you can see the cover on my website. I can actually probably show you that at least. It's a story of a little girl who is growing up in between cultures. Her parents come from, let me see if I can get that. Her parents come from of the villages of India. Now, my parents came from the villages. They weren't like from sophisticated urban areas. And so they actually were very old fashioned. And I found myself, as I said, code switching. So this is, I don't really have that one up yet. So anyway, that I found myself code switching between, I'll see if I can show it to you. Here it is on Macmillan. So this is the book, Home is in Between. And it's, she's balancing, you can see she's saying goodbye to her grandmother and she's about to embark on a new life somewhere in the Midwest of the United States. And in the book, she goes back and forth between the two places. And again, the illustrator was fabulous. She used sort of the orange and the Indian flag colors on the left-hand side of the page, which always represents the village. And on the right, she used the blue, reds, and whites of the American flag. And so Shanti, whose name means peace, is going back and forth across the border of the book and trying her best to code switch like I did. And I love the spread at the end because at the end, she champions her space, like in between those two cultures. You can see the village and the town. It's always the village and the town. And she champions that. And she, at the end of the book, makes it a place of hospitality for everybody to bring in their own villages. And they end up having a huge party in the last spread. So it's really that I find that my immigrant upbringing actually is a big advantage once you survive it. To be able to master two cultures as a child gives you that code switching fluency that you don't acquire any other way. As an adult, it's hard to learn it, just like it's hard to learn languages as adults, right? Second languages. But if you do it as a child, the rest of the time, like I said, you can really cross borders well. You keep a little bit of that code switching capacity. So this is an invitation for children to celebrate their in-betweenness and to offer the strengths of hospitality that you get when you do a lot of border crossing. So that's that book, February 2021. And then the third one, as I said, I haven't even, not public yet. You're the first to know. I just signed a contract, and it's called What's Between Your Hands. And the Indian gesture of Namaste is really about, serving, how you serve. So it's that idea of how small hands can still make a difference in a world that's really full of injustice. And it's just a call for children to put their hands to use in the cause of justice and love and all those things. So that's the in-between books. And then my book just came out, Forward Me Back to You. Let me stop my screen sharing so I can show you the cover of that. Forward Me Back to You came out in paperback, novel. It's about lots of tropes that I don't like in literature, like the magical mammy figure. I have never liked that figure because there's no backstory, but I have a wonderful Black woman in this book from Sierra Leone. Her name is Grandma V. I worked really hard to know this character and give her a backstory, so she's in there. The outside savior, that trope I play around with in that. It's about international adoption and human trafficking, and it has a Bollywood vibe and humor. So I'm a little crazy when it comes to those literary challenges. I should probably just stick to one or two, but I like mixing genres. I like the intersections of things. They're really interesting to me.
Sounds amazing. I'm excited to see those titles, and I think, seeing this forthcoming title, I think it's just powerful looking at your body of work and the breadth of your work. Just acknowledging, who are the young people, particularly in the U.S. We have such a diverse population of young people in the U.S. now, and so being able to see your experience or your family's experience reflected in titles like yours, I think is really powerful. So I really, thank you and commend you for that work. It's great. And just seeing the trailers that you gave us this evening are really exciting for some of those titles that explore, experiences from other peoples. We're here talking about Latin American studies, but I think it's really important to acknowledge, all the other area studies and areas that you've done your work in, having received, a South Asia Book Award and other book awards from other world regions. I'm going to turn to another question here that we got in the chat. Is there any other behind the scenes experiences that you can share about writing children's books or the writing process?
Do you want to hear about the rejections and the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome and the you want to hear about that? It's the glamorous life of a children's book writer. I get to do this full time. I get to go into those classrooms full of Guatemalan children or Jewish children or whatever kind of children and read them the story, and that is a huge privilege for me. And I did have my share of rejections. I tell people, I'm the child of immigrants who sacrificed, actually they were refugees first and immigrants second, and they sacrificed like crazy to get us here, to give us a good education. And then you tell your parents who sent you to really top-notch schools, I'm gonna be a children's book writer, Mom and Dad. Doesn't that sound good? There's like, I say there are three options there's three girls, Sonali, Rupali, Mitali. We're all our names rhyme. We speak Bengali. But there were three options for Sonali, Mitali, Rupali. One was you could be an engineer, the second was you could be a doctor, and the third one was you could be an engineer. That was it. So I can tell you about all that stuff, about how I really feel like I was led into this beautiful vocation. My dad was a storyteller. He was a funny guy and just loved telling stories. So it's his fault, really, when you think about it. He got me into this. But my second book was rejected by 22 different publishers. It was 12 years between book one and book two. At that time, the market really, this is a for-profit industry. People are not sitting around saying, oh, let me publish little books by people, featuring border stories or have no white characters in them. And those were my books. So they were rejected quite a long time until people woke up and said, hey, kids are not as dumb as adults. They can cross borders. they don't need bridge characters, and they don't need to see, they really have a flexible imagination. So let's publish books like this. And thankfully the market's changing, but I did have my share of rejections. My books often talk about justice. Like I said, I like the nuance of intersections. I believe children can travel there with me to learn about nuance, and invite them into that. Looking back those 12 years, rejection after 22 publishers saying no. And I look back though and I think, man, I must have wanted this. This must have been a calling. This must have been a divine something or other that was helping me out, because there were times where I got on my knees and said, really? Do I really want to do this? And I always heard, yes, do this thing. Because like I said, when I started, stories really change the world. They do. The stories of a culture really change, especially for the next generation. So sometimes I wish I had a time machine. I could go back in time and find all these people that are in the headlines and find them when they were like 7 years old and just read them a few stories, and then fast forward and the entire world would be different. We wouldn't be in this mess we're in. Just read them some children's books.
Well, you are resilient. You have steadfast resilience, and I hope that continues, and that you'll continue to have success with your work.
And an award like this really helps. I'll tell you, it just helps encourage me that my work is not in vain. So thank you guys so much to the committee and for all of you for seeing, kind of celebrating what I tried to do in the story.
Yeah, we have got some good comments in the chat from Molly. Love the story. My 4-year-old sat and listened to your reading of the story with me. And then Mitali, I'll just ask you, any kind of final thoughts to share around, connecting with young people, or any messages to educators, just broadly thinking about, the role of educators, and how, to give credit where credit's due with the educators that are joining us and that are doing such hard work.
Yes, absolutely. I am astounded by how you guys are pivoting and continuing to stay true to your calling, which is to keep educating those children and raising them up in the middle of all of this. It's been amazing to see how you guys have responded to this. And I know you understand the power of a story. There's the feeling like the screens are taking over the world. Look at us, we're all like behind the screens now. But there's something about a slow read with a person that you love and that you trust, of a story, giving room for questions. And I think that's what I love the most about picture book reading when I did it with our boys, is that you were able to encircle them into the story and give them that room to think and ask the questions. And so keep doing that. You're doing an amazing job. I think about you parents. I don't know, parenting was hard enough. Teaching I taught as well, was very, very difficult, because you'd go home at the end of the day and be exhausted. So I think we should have free spa days for all educators for the rest of 2020 and 2021. Yes, that is a much needed thing, and parents too. But my respect and honor goes to you all for not giving up.
I agree. And I want to thank you, Mitali, again for your work and spending the hour with us tonight. Thanks everyone who joined us. And thank you especially to the educators for all your hard work. I want to encourage everyone to stay safe and keep reading. And I think we're right at time for our Américas Award program for this year. So thank you again.